Good morning. So, I've been waking up right early in the morning with ideas on my mind, and God giving me things to go and work on. He gives me burdens, and I wake up and I'll make a video or I'll do some research on something that He's burdened me with. Like, for example, He'll kind of give me this little feeling or idea around a subject. However, I have to go and do the work to find out what he's talking about. And whenever this happens, it's quite magical. I always find these amazing connections and stuff every time it happens. Every time he gives me those little inklings to go, it's like the as below, so above, right? So he gives me the below, like, here, go look over here. There's something important, and I have to go find the above, right? And lately he's been burdening me with this the gender thing. I've been waking up in the morning like thinking about how we're all pretending to be divided in all these different ways, and instead of looking at the main thing that divides us, and that is our genders. We look out to the government and say it's damn conservatives, damn liberals, and really we should be looking down into our own hearts and realizing we have a conservative and a liberal in our own hearts. And instead of calling it that, we can call it the liberal feminine and the masculine conservative. And if we could get past these things, then we could realize is we can start the healing journey right here in our own hearts, and then in our own homes, and then in our own communities, and it'll fractal out so fast that the government will be working for us again. Because right now, the government is working for this other intersubjective society that is following them. So it's like, oh, we're following what the people want, but they've brainwashed these people into these ideas. And I do feel like the transgender thing that's going on is a distraction from the main thing that divides us, and that's the two genders, not the whatever amount they've at right now, if it's 30 or what by now. The whole point is that we have to be able to understand our feminine and our masculine thing, and if we are confused with all this other stuff and we're trying to continue to make this other intersubjective reality work with our reality, well, then there's a problem, because you can go and live how you want to live in your own communities, and you can do whatever things that I may think is not healthy and you may think is healthy, and you go live that way. However, once you start putting it in front of all these children and not really understanding how dangerous this is, then I have to stand up and I have to speak. And that's why I've been making these videos on some of the transgender stuff and different gender stuff that's dividing us, like the feminism and all that, these kind of things. However, the biggest thing that makes me passionate, and it is fueled by anger, and this is how we use our dragon on a chain to do amazing things to the world, is when you feel that anger, use it for passion in your speech, and use it for the inspiration to go and fight the dragons in your own community. And I've been asking God, when will you give me some ears to hear all the things you've been teaching me? And I know I have your ears here out in the internet. However, I'm talking about in my own community because I want to see results here in the real world. And I'll go back to the kids. What did Jesus say about those who hurt children? Luke 17, 1-4. One day Jesus said to his disciples, "There will always be temptation to sin, but what sorrows await the person who does the tempting? It would be better to be thrown into the sea with a millstone hung around your neck than to cause one of these little ones to fall into sin. So watch yourselves. If another believer sins, rebuke that person. Then, if there is repentance, forgive, even if the person wrongs you 7 times a day, and each time turns again and asks for forgiveness, you must forgive." And I know a lot of these people are possessed by these ideologies, and we have to forgive them. They know not what they do. But that's a different forgiveness than what Jesus is talking about right here. And so we have to give them the knowledge so they're not ignorant of these dangers. And when you give them that knowledge, if they still continue to live in their ideology, then you have to know it's pearls upon swine. And you have to know that their thing is going to die sooner or later. But it's not because we just sit by passively to and wait for it to happen. No, it's going to die down because people like us speak up. And God gave me a place to speak. And I'm going to speak today a little bit. We're just going to talk to one of the guys that runs the place, and we're going to kind of start to talk about the situation. And I guess next week there's going to be a non-binary person there. And so I've thought about this, and right after I was given this opportunity, because this is my passion, I want to speak this truth, I was like, wow, thanks God. Like, I asked for this and you gave it to me. So I thanked God. And then right then I had this feeling like this could easily turn into an ambush. Not because they're planning to ambush me, but because when people get emotional about their ideas, or when somebody speaks a truth that starts to kill their idea, or that's the exorcist that's killing those demons out of people, and they're going to react, and that can become quite an ambush. So I've been meditating on how I can stay calm and cool for this situation. And also I've been thinking about how can I know I'm even in a room that's going to be listening to me. Am I casting pearls upon swine? So my idea is to go in and just speak questions. I'm going to start out, first of all, I'm just going to sit and watch the room and see what the room says and see what's going on, because maybe I don't need to come in, maybe I don't have to come in sugarcoating it as much as I think. So if I feel like it is a room that is very vulnerable, emotionally vulnerable to these ideologies, then I'm going to come in with questions. And the first question I'm going to ask is, do you believe that children can be confused about their gender? The room will say yes. So then the next question will be like, how do we discern who's confused and who is actually transgender or non-binary? And that's going to open up some dialogue in the room. And then that is going to allow me to know where to go from there. And, maybe I let that go around the circle for a while. And when I likely think it's not going to get as deep as I want it to go. So I'm going to ask another question. Do you believe that some people will be confused about their gender or choose the opposite gender or some kind of gender because of a trauma of the past? And the room will say, somebody in the room is going to say yes. And then I'll continue on. And then so if there is a trauma that's causing a person to switch to the other sex because they feel less vulnerable as that sex because of this trauma or abuse, then is it a good idea for us to encourage them in their confusion? And a lot of people will say, let's just let them go through their thing and it'll resolve itself. And that's actually true. Like 65 to 80%, there's two different studies, 65 and 80% of people who transition back. So yes, there is a natural flow to this confusion. However, we have to know that when we are trying to accept the radical acceptance and to the point where we're hanging up transgender flags in every window, including the churches, a church in my town, we are promoting something that is potentially causing other issues down the line, And maybe already I'm going to go too deep right there. Like maybe the room's going to attack, and maybe I just have to step back and let it calm and see if somebody else will come up and speak, because it's going to be kind of like a circle, right? So I'm trying to come in without being like saying what I really think. Well, no, like I'm trying to go in there and say what I want to say without saying some of the harsh things I have to say is a better way to look at it. To be honest, if you watch my videos on this, I'm straight to the point. I'm pretty direct with it. And I cannot do that in this room. I'm going to have to, as far as I know, I'm not going to be able to do that in this room. So I'm going to have to come at it like as if you're talking to somebody with trauma, considering there's actually going to be a transgender person in the room. Here's another question I'll ask. Do we believe that mental illnesses can be contagious? And a lot of people will say yes, some people will say no, and then I'll bring up the fact that anorexia and bulimia was a huge pathology that spread because of media's and all these skinny women and them finding out how they were doing this. It affected millions and millions of women because of this passing around of this information as if it's the new thing, and it's like this new group, this new way of being beautiful, and so I see this as very the same as the transgender thing, is that you make all these people that don't feel accepted because of their trauma, that they will find this gang to hang out with, and that's the transgender group. So they're creating this acceptance for these people. However, we should just be accepting everybody, and realizing the fact that she doesn't feel accepted or he doesn't feel accepted is that there is things that we need to go look at from the past. And for us to just ignore those traumas from the past and instead just coddle them in their ways of avoiding this trauma, or coddle them in their ways of finding a group that leaves them exactly the way they are. And the Father is the one that knows what you can be. And the reason that I stand in that role is because I see now what kind of potential, what the DNA in our body can activate. All this junk DNA, it activates. But that activates after you deal with your trauma. So we can give people a million ways to avoid their trauma. We can tell them, the world was hard on you and this is how it is. And yet sometimes we have to go back and look at what the trauma was and change our perception. And it really does come down to the genders. And if I get this far, then we can talk about, maybe people feel more safe to change over from a woman to a man. Maybe if a person feels more safe changing from a man to a woman. And that it's all based upon our idea of what the world is. And many, many people have had trauma from the masculine, so they feel like we're living in a patriarchy, and there's all these dark masculine people around, and then there's people like myself that have had the opposite side, where I have to keep an eye on myself to not become angry with the feminine, because I am very much not accepted by a lot of the feminine, because they see my masculinity as scary. And it's easy for me to be like, go back into my trauma and react to that. So I have to keep an eye on that stuff. And the only way for us to move forward is for us all to know that we carry those traumas, and when they start coming up, we can call ourselves on it. And that's only going to happen when the true conversations happen. But what sorrow awaits the person who does the tempting? And what is sin? Well, sin is to miss the mark. And so many people are not looking at whether they're sinning or not. And so they're pulling people into temptation because they're ignorant of their sin. And so we can sit back and watch people sin. However, if you don't speak up and you start seeing things get worse and worse, you're going to get resentful, So I thank the Lord for providing me these ears that to hear what I have to say, because it's important for me to see the results of the wisdom that's been bestowed upon me that I pass on to people. That's my reward. And so I can make these videos and do all this stuff, and it's great. And yet what really helps me is when people like you guys that are watching comment down below and tell me how if anything I'm saying is helping, or please tell me if I'm off base with how I'm speaking, because I only want to get better at this. So this is my call to humility to everybody: is please be a constructive critic and write some things down below, and please encourage me if you feel like there's things I've said that really helped, because that's what is my payment. So I want to say to everybody out there, I think you know of dragons that you could go and slay. I think you know there's things that you could become more knowledgeable about so that you have the gnosis to go and slay those dragons. And I encourage people, if you're waking up early in the morning with thoughts on your mind, go into them. Go investigate them. That's a burden the Lord is putting on your shoulders, because there's probably a place for you to use that knowledge He's bestowing upon you. So I encourage you to go out and speak your truth. And in the way we're learning how to be elders, and we're proving ourselves to our communities that we can be elders when we go and speak about the hard things. So much love and God bless.